Okay, our lesson today is we want to practice dividing decimals. Our Common Core standard today is to fluently add, subtract, multiply, and divide multi-digit numbers using the standard algorithm. So that's going to be a 6NS3, one of our fluency standards. There are two types of decimals that we're going to be looking at today. First, we have a terminating decimal. Terminating decimal is a decimal that stops or terminates. Some examples are 5/10. Notice the decimal stops in the tenths place. 1 and 25 hundredths. Decimal terminates or stops in the hundredths place. 375 thousandths. 25 and 10,000 and 25 hundred thousandths. But notice each one of these decimals, they stop at a certain decimal place. The other type of decimal is the repeating decimal. That's a decimal that repeats the same digit or group of digits. A bar is drawn over the digits that repeat. And if you look at two of the repeating decimals here, we have 0 and 3/10, but there's a line over that 3 in the tenths place, which means that that 3 is going to repeat over and over again. You guys should be familiar with the fraction that's associated with that decimal, right? It is 1/3. Here's another example. We have 1 and 27 hundredths, but the decimal part repeats. 27 hundredths repeats over and over again. Notice the line is over both the 2 and the 7, but the line is not drawn over the 1 because it's only the decimal part, the 2 and the 7, that repeat. So first we want to identify or be able to identify if these decimals are terminating or repeating. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do some long division and divide the whole number 62 by the whole number 8. So if I start with 62 as my dividend, 8's my divisor, and I divide 8 into 62. 8 goes into 62 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. We subtract, I get 6. Now notice, right, there's no more numbers to bring down, so we put a decimal point in the back of the number. Right, add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 67 times. 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract, I get 4. Right, bring down the next 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. Subtract, I get 0. Notice that the decimal terminates in the hundredths place, so this would be classified as a terminating decimal. Right, let's write that, terminating decimal, because it terminates in the hundredths place. And if we look at our next example, 5/6, those of you that memorize your fraction decimal percent equivalents, you should recognize that that's going to be the decimal 83 1/3, and the 3 is going to repeat. But let's pretend you don't know that. So we want to take 5 and divide that by 6. So in order to do that, right, we have to divide 6 into 5, put a decimal point behind the 5, add a few zeros, and we divide. 6 can't go in the 5, but 6 goes in the 50, 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. And we subtract, I get 2. Bring down the 0. 6 goes into 20. 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. Subtract, I get 2. Bring down the next 0. 6 goes into 20. 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. Subtract, I get 2. Notice that the decimal 3 begins to repeat, and that repetition is going to repeat forever. So this would be classified as a repeating decimal. All right. So if it's a repeating decimal, remember to put the line over the decimal part that repeats. Decimal that terminates stops at a certain decimal place. So let's see what it's like to divide decimals by whole numbers. We have to place the decimal point in the quotient above the decimal point in the dividend, then divide as you would with whole numbers. Continue till there's no remainder. All right, so let's take 7 and 6/10, and we want to divide that by 4. So 4 is my divisor. 7 and 6/10 is my dividend. Put the decimal point in the quotient, and then I divide. 4 goes into 7 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. We subtract, we get 3. Bring down the 6. 4 goes into 36 9 times. 9 times 4 is 36. We subtract, I get 0. So we wound up with 1 and 9/10 as our quotient. Notice that decimal terminates, right? And I think all of these decimals are going to terminate because we don't want any remainders here. If we look at our next example, I'm going to divide 12 into 4 and 38/100ths. Put the decimal point in our quotient. 12 can't go in the 4, but it goes in the 43 3 times. 3 times 12 is 36. I subtract, I get 7. Bring down the 8. 12 goes in the 78 6 times. 6 times 12 is 72. Subtract, I get 6. So I add a 0. I bring that 0 down. 12 goes into 60 5 times. 5 times 12 is 60. Subtract, I get 0. So our quotient here is going to be 365 thousandths. Okay, we can try each one of these examples. All right, you guys can try them on your own, but I'll work them out here. So if you want to try them on your own, you'd stop the video at this point. All right, but I'm going to keep going. So problem 1, we want to divide 36 and 4/10 by 2. 2 is my divisor. 36 and 4/10 is my dividend. Decimal point goes in my quotient. 2 goes into 36. Or actually, 2 goes into 3 one time. 1 times 2 is 2. Subtract, I get 1. Bring down the 6. 2 goes into 6 8 times. 8 times 2 is 16. Subtract, I get 0. Bring down the 4. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract, we get 0. Problem 2. 6 is my divisor. 22 and 2/10 is my dividend. Put the decimal point in my quotient. Right. 6 goes into 22 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. Subtract, I get 4. Bring down the 2. 6 goes into 42 7 times. 7 times 6 is 42. Subtract, we get 0. So the quotient is going to be 3 and 7/10. Problem 3. We have 7 is our divisor. 59 and let's see, 64/100ths is our decimal part. Decimal point goes in the quotient. 7 into 59, that's 8 times. 8 times 7 is 56. Subtract, I get 3. Bring down the 6. 7 goes into 36 5 times. 5 times 7 is 35. Subtract, I get 1. Bring down the 4. 7 goes into 14 2 times. 2 times 7 is 14. Subtract, we get 0. Problem number 4 we'll do down here. Problem 4, 14 is our divisor. 43 26/100ths is our dividend. 14 goes into 43. Is that 3 times? 3 times 4 is 12. 2 carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3 and 1 is 4. Subtract, I get 1. Bring down the 2. 14 can't go into 12, so 0 goes in our quotient. Bring down the 6. 14 into 126. That's going to go 9 times. 9 times 4 is 36. Put down the 6, carry the 3. 9 times 1 is 9, and 3 is 12. Subtract, we get 0. So 3 and 9/100ths is our quotient. Problem 5. We have 4 into 6 and 2/10. Decimal point in our quotient. 4 goes into 6 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract, we get 2. Bring down the 2. 4 times 5 is 20. Subtract, we get 2. Going to have to add a 0. Bring that 0 down. 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. Subtract, we get 0 there. And then problem 6. Problem 6. That's going to be 16 as our divisor. Our dividend is 3 and 1200ths. Put the decimal point in our quotient. 16 can't go into 3, but 16 goes into 31 one time. 1 times 16 is 16. Subtract. That's going to give me 15. I bring down the 2. 16 goes in the 152. That's going to be 9 times. 9 times 6 is 54. Carry the 5. 9 times 1 is 5. And 9 times 1 is 9. And 5 is 14. Subtract. It's going to be 4, 12. It's going to be 8. Add a 0. Bring that 0 down. 16 goes into 80 5 times. 5 times 16 is 80. Subtract, we get 0. So our quotient is 195 thousandths. Next thing we want to look at is multiplying, dividing decimals by decimals. Here we want to multiply the divisor and the dividend by a power of 10 to make the divisor a whole number. Then we place the decimal point in the quotient and divide as you would with whole numbers. Right? Continue until there's no remainder. Now this is one of the things that drives me crazy when we teach or learn about dividing decimals. Students know that they have to slide the decimal point, but they don't understand what is going on mathematically when they slide the decimal point. So let's consider this for a second. Let's rewrite this problem as 18 and 2/10 in our numerator and 1.4 in the denominator. So we can write this division problem as a fraction. Right? Let's just consider this for a minute. If we wanted to make an equivalent fraction, I could multiply the numerator and the denominator by 10 over 10. Right? What's going to happen? Well, 18 and 2/10 times 10 is 182. 1 and 4/10 times 10 is going to be 14. We made an equivalent fraction. 18 and 2/10 divided by 1 and 4/10 is the same as 182 divided by 14. Right? So this is the problem that we're solving here. We're actually going to solve or do the division for 14 into 182. The quotient of that division problem will be the same as the quotient for our original problem here, 18 and 2/10 divided by 1 and 4/10. Right? So when we slide the decimal point, right, let's do that here, 18 and 2/10, and it's 1 and 4/10. When we slide the decimal point one place in the right in our dividend, one place in the right in our divisor, and a decimal point in our quotient. All right, divisor, dividend, quotient. And by doing that, we're really multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 10. Now we have our divisor written as a whole number, and that's what we want to do when we're dividing decimals and we have a decimal divisor. We want to multiply or move that decimal point as many places to the right as we need to make it a whole number. So now 14 goes into 18 one time. 1 times 14 is 14. Subtract, I get 4. Bring down the 2. 14 goes into 42 3 times. 3 times 14 is 42. Subtract, right, we get 0. So 18 and 2/10 divided by 1 and 4/10 is going to be 13. Well, let's look at this next problem. 39 hundredths is our divisor. 273 thousandths is our dividend. Our first step is to take this decimal divisor and move the decimal point to the right till we no longer have a decimal, we have a whole number, the number 39. But if I move the decimal point 2 places to the right in our divisor, I have to move the decimal point 2 places to the right in our dividend and put a decimal point in the quotient. And understand, when we move that decimal point to the right, we're multiplying both parts of the numerator and the denominator of a fraction by some power of 10. Because we moved the decimal point 2 places to the right in both the divisor and the dividend, we're actually multiplying by the second power of 10, which is 100. All right? So each time we move the decimal point 1 place to the right, we're multiplying by a power of 10. So now I'm ready to divide. 39 can't go into 27, so 0 is going to go in my quotient. But 39 can go into 273. How many times? Well, this is about 40, right? So, and I take the 4. How many times does 4 go into 27? That should be about 6 times. Let's try 6. 6 times 9 is 54. 4 carry the 5. 6 times 3 is 18, and 5 is 23. I subtract. That's 6. That's 13. That's 9. 6 take away 2 is 4. Is that a 2? I think so. So that's too large, that remainder. So we must adjust our quotient. So let's redo that. Gotta adjust the quotient. And sometimes that's going to happen when we approximate our quotients. So let's raise that quotient up by 1. Let's make that a 7. Let's try 7. 7 times 9 is 63. Put down the 3, carry the 6. 7 times 3 is 21. And 6 is 27. Right? And that's going to give us a 0. So 7/10 would be our quotient. Let's try a few of these. Let's do problem 7. So we have 1 and 2/10. Dividing that into 9 and 6/10. Going to slide the decimal point 1 place to the right in our divisor, 1 place to the right in our dividend. Decimal point goes in our quotient. 12 into 96 goes 8 times. 8 times 12 is 96. Subtract, we get 0. Problem 8. We have 3 and 4/10 into 57 and 8/10. Slide the decimal point 1 place to the right in our divisor, 1 place to the right in our dividend. Decimal point goes in the quotient. 34 goes into 57 1 time. 1 times 34 is 34. I subtract. That's going to give me 3. That's going to give me 2. Bring down the 8. 34 into 238. Let's see. That's about 3. 3 times 7 is 21. Let's try 8. 8 times 4 is 32. 2 carry the 3. 8 times 3 is 11. 11 and 8 times 3 is 24. 3 is 27. So 8 is too large. Right? So we have to adjust the quotient. Right? And that's going to happen. So let's adjust that. And instead of 8, let's try 7. 7 times 4 is 28. 8 carry the 2. 7 times 3 is 21, and 2 is 23. Right? We get a remainder of 0. So sometimes we will have to adjust those quotients. Problem 9. 2 and 3/10 into 21 and 643 thousandths. Slide the decimal point 1 place to the right in our divisor, 1 place to the right in our dividend. Decimal point goes into the quotient. 23 can't go into 21, but it goes into 216. Well, 23 times 10 would be 230, so I think that's going to be a 9. 9 times 3 is 27, carry the 2. 9 times 2 is 18, and 2 is 20. Subtract. 0, that's 6. 16 take away 7 is 9. 0, take away 0, 0. Bring down the 4. 23 into 94. That's going to be 3, 6, 9, 12. That's going to be 4 times. 4 times 3 is 12. Put down the 2, carry the 1. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. We subtract, I get 2. Bring down the 3. And 2 goes into 23. 23 goes into 23 1 time. 1 times 23 is 23. Subtract, we're going to get 0 there. And then let's do problem 10. Problem 10, we have 51 hundredths is our divisor. 459 thousandths is our dividend. We're going to have to slide the decimal point 2 places to the right in our divisor, 2 places to the right in our dividend. Decimal in our quotient. 51 can't go into 45, so 0 goes in our quotient. But 51 goes into 459. How many times? Let's try 9. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 5 is 45. Subtract, I get 0. Well, that worked out nicely. Our quotient is 9/10. Okay, last couple of problems here. Let's try this one. We have 0. Oops. We have 0.007, so that's 7 thousandths. We're dividing that into 2 and 45 hundredths. In our divisor, we're going to have to slide the decimal point 3 places to the right to make that divisor into a whole number. So I have to go 3 places to the right in our dividend. But when I move 3 places to the right, I run out of numbers. So I have to add a 0 at the end of the number. Then I'm able to put my decimal point in my quotient. And now we divide 7 into 2,450. That's essentially what we're doing here. 7 goes into 24 3 times. 3 times 7 is 21. Subtract, I get 3. Bring down to 5. 5 times 7 is 35. Subtract, I get 0. Right, bring down the 0. 7 doesn't go into 0. So our quotient is going to be 350. All right. So let's try these last few examples here. I think that's it. Yep. So we'll start with number 11. We have 16 hundredths, and we're dividing that into 3 8/10. We have to slide the decimal point 2 places in our divisor to make the decimal part a whole number. So I have to slide the decimal 2 places in our dividend to the right. So I have to add a 0 because I run out of digits, and then put the decimal point in our quotient. 16 goes in 38 2 times. 2 times 16 is 32. Subtract, I get 6. Bring down the 0. 16 goes into 60. 3 times. 3 times 16 is 48. Gonna subtract, I get, what's that, 12? Right, that's 5, that's 10. That's gonna be 2, that's 1. Add a 0. Bring it down. 16 goes into 120. Let's see. 16 times 8 would be 128, so that's going to be a 7. 7 times 6 is 42. Carry the 4. 7 times 1 is 7. 4 is 11. Subtract, I get 8. I'm going to have to add another 0 and bring that 0 down. And then 16 goes in 80 5 times. 5 times 16 is 80. And then I'm going to subtract. And that's going to give me 0. Problem 12. We have 78 hundredths. Dividing that into 15 and 6/10. We have to slide our decimal point 2 places to the right in our divisor, 2 places to the right in our dividend. Have to add a 0 at the end of the number. Decimal point goes in our quotient. 78 goes into 156. I think that's going to go 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Carry the 1. 2 times 7 is 14. 1 is 15. That's nice. Subtract, I get 0. So 0's got to go into our quotient. Our quotient's going to be 20. Problem 13. 13, we have 48 thousandths. And we're dividing 48 thousandths into 7 2/10. Right. Slide the decimal point 1, 2, 3 places to the right in our divisor. 1, 2, 3 places to the right in our dividend. I have to add 2 zeros because I ran out of digits. So I add 2 zeros and then put the decimal point in our quotient. 48 goes into 72 1 time. 1 times 48 is 48. Subtract. That's going to give me 6. That's going to give me 12. That's 4. That's 2. And I'm going to bring down the 0. Well, I know 48 times 10 is 480. 240 is half that, so this is going to be 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. 0, carry the 4. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 4 is 24. Subtract, I get 0. So that's going to be 150 is our quotient for number 13. And the last problem today is going to be 3 thousandths into 18 hundredths. What's that going to look like? Well, in our divisor, we have to slide the decimal point 3 places to the right to make our divisor a whole number. So I have to slide the decimal point 3 places to the right in our dividend, and the decimal point goes into our quotient. 3 goes into 18 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract, I get 0. Bring down the 0. 3 can't go into 0, so a 0 goes on our quotient, and our quotient for problem 14 is going to be 60. Alright, I hope that was helpful, and see you guys soon. Alright, so